Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining us for day number 1 wrap-up session at Biotech Showcase, our 12th year of this wonderful, wonderful event. And this year, we decided to invite a group of our pharma friends and executives together to focus in on the pharma perspective and transformation and trends in the industry. And I think there's an awful lot that we will cover, led by David Gilman. David is a partner with Clearview Healthcare Partners, and you've been in the industry for 25 years. Yeah, I think a lot of us may have, and still in the industry, which I think is really, really great. So David, I'll turn it over to you without any further ado, and let's continue the discussion. It was a really lively one during lunch, and this will be a lively one as well.
Excellent, and I'm looking forward to hearing in some of the discussion and maybe some of the questions. We will try to save some time, a little bit of feedback from the lunch discussion, which unfortunately I wasn't able to join, but sounds like it was absolutely fascinating.
We do have stand-up mics, and in the audience, so you'll be able to ask questions. We do ask you to ask a question, not tell a story. So that is our big request.
Sounds good. And I'll ask the panelists to tell a few stories. And hopefully we'll make this much more of a discussion. Late in the day, I'm sure there are some receptions to follow. We'll try to keep things lively. But what we've been asked to talk a little bit about is, given all of our background, which in one way, shape, or form often touches transactional elements, licensing, acquisition, investment, the manner in which the interplay between the pace of innovation impacts deal activity, and maybe a little bit also then the other way. How does some of the deal activity, especially coming out of last year, which was a banner year, how does that then impact the continued pace of innovation? And I think one of the themes, we were talking a little bit outside, and I'll ask people as we go here in a moment. We'll make some introductions and hear some opening comments. But I'll maybe be a little bit provocative as now a consultant, former industry. In both roles that I've played, I'm not sure we're tremendously good at all times at embracing risk. And there's so much incredible innovation going on at the moment. How do we do our part as part of this broader social contract that we've been talking about? How do we do our part best? How do we organize ourselves to really continue to stimulate the pace of discovery and development? And we'll talk a bit about that. We've got the right panel here to do so. Rather than making everybody listen to me, I think, Debbie, I may put you on the spot, starting down at the far end, and ask you to introduce yourself, and maybe as we come down the line, a comment or two about, we're sitting at the beginning of the year. As I mentioned, last year was a banner year with something north of $400 billion put into play. Do we see that kind of transactional pace continuing this year? And are there some hot spots that you're particularly excited about?
Great, sure. So I was getting comfortable because I thought they were going to start at that end. So Debbie Watson, I head the Oncology Business Development Group for Janssen. It's one of 6 therapeutic areas that we focus on. I've been with Janssen for about 28 years. I've worked across multiple therapeutic areas. I've been in BD for about 17 years, and so have had the privilege of really seeing our BD activity and our strategies across multiple business units, if you will. I worked in CNS when I started my career, and then I moved to infectious disease, and I've now been in oncology for about 7 years. And we've had a number of different transactions that we've done along the continuum of managing risk, so we can talk about that. I think as far as thinking about the future of 2020 and what that holds versus 2019, I do think we'll see more deals. I think things are moving so rapidly right now, and science is evolving so quickly that I think we will see other deals and big deals in 2020. Interestingly, I was at a reception last night, and I was talking to 2 CEOs who have been in the industry for 30 plus years, each of them, and both of them commented on how fast science is moving now versus at any other time in their career. And I think that breeds the opportunity to do more deals.
Absolutely. Thank you, Debbie. Kumar?
Good afternoon, everyone. Kumar Srinivasan, head of biopharmaceuticals BD for AstraZeneca. I've been in AZ for 7 years. Prior to that, I at Pfizer, and also straddled in biotech. So I actually did business from both on the buy side and the sell side. In AZ Biopharmaceuticals, AZ actually reorganized our R&D as well as the commercial into 2 business units exactly around this time last year. It was a total surprise. We were at the JP Morgan, and there's a 5 a.m. call that we are announcing the reorganization. So I head up the BD for the non-oncology. So we have oncology as a one business unit. It's its own R&D and BD group, and I had everything else from the BD perspective. With respect to what 2020 bring in, I think it's going to be interesting. I think the first half, you will see, I agree with Debbie, that'll be a bigger, quicker pace of deals. But we may see actually slowing down in the second half, precisely because of the U.S. elections. The politics is a big question. So you may see more IPOs in the first quarter, maybe in the first half. But I think my expectation is they'll taper down, given just a bit uncertainty and what the political campaign brings in. So.
John.
Hi, I'm John McDonald. I head up global R&D business development for Novo Nordisk. So I have everything from discovery through and into proof of concept studies is in my group. We have people sitting in Boston. I joined Novo Nordisk to be the site head of the Boston office. So there we have some people from BD, but other scientists, alliance management, people looking to access innovation on a more broad basis. But Novo Nordisk is a Danish company, Copenhagen-based, and I think as I look out this year, some of the things that I'm thinking of, I agree, I think deals will continue to be done. It's never going to stop. The cost of the deals, I'll look to that. To me, that's a little bit more interesting. So, and I've always said, tell me the future, I'll tell you the answer. But if the future is something along the lines that we start to hit a bubble in terms of access to capital, that'll be interesting to see how that works, because people brought in a lot of money, and then they spent an awful lot of money. And what happened there? So I think that's something that might affect people's willingness to do deals and or the structures or the cost at which we do deals. In terms of spaces of interest, I think there's 2. One, just in terms of innovation, I'm fascinated by gene therapy. And I think we're going to see some readouts, and we've started to see some readouts in gene therapy, but the pace of those readouts is going to increase. To me, I love the innovation about the pricing models that have to come about that. I think that's super intriguing. And then if I go a little bit further back in terms of science, cell therapies, and I know some of the people up here operating in the cell therapy space, we have, so Novo Nordisk, diabetes, obesity, all these things that are kind of what everyone thinks about Novo Nordisk, but they've created a stem cell unit and invested heavily in that unit with a manufacturing facility in Fremont, but they're heavily into that. I think there's going to be some really interesting work done in the stem cell space. There is work done in that space, but I think that may begin to accelerate this year.
Absolutely. I think we'll come back to those topics as we continue the discussion. Yeah. Thank you, John. Philippe.
Philippe Lopez-Fernandez. I'm heading business development and alliance management for Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany. So not to be confounded by, with our ex-subsidiary, which is Merck & Co. here in the US. We have, we split the Merck name globally. We have the right to the Merck name in 193 countries out of 195, but they do have the right in the US and Canada. These 2 small countries. We are a company that is really focusing on innovation, both in our healthcare, but also in the 2 other segments that we have. And I think that there's more deals that needs to be done and that are going to be done in the future. There's going to be a hiatus with the U.S. election. There's definitely going to be a pause starting in the summer and waiting for the result of the election. During that time, we're going to be heavily criticized about everything, because we're a perfect target as the industry. But again, we are, I'm also amazed at the pace of innovation in the recent years. When you see what happened in fighting cancer in the past 40 years and what happened in the past 5 years, it's just stunning. And I think this pace of innovation is going to accelerate. I'm less worried about a bubble because there's also a lot of pockets of financing that are not linked to the stock market. So I think I'm not worried about the financing of innovation. I'm a little bit worried, and we discussed that in the preparation, about what is the real definition of innovation. When you have, we counted end of last year with my team 41 PD-1, PD-L1s that are in development in the US. Is that innovation? So more to come.
I absolutely want to talk about this as well. But before we come back to so many interesting things that have come down the line, Friedman.
Yeah, Friedman Janus. I'm heading the regional business development, globally heading the regional business development and the alliance management for Bayer. So the way it's set up at Bayer, we have global TA teams and then in parallel a regional organization which is basically co-located with our core regions. So we look at from two dimensions at our opportunities and additional alliance management. I think looking into 2020, I'm actually pretty optimistic that we'll see quite a deal volume, right? Because just if you go from, there was so many deals last year, how can it continue? That's one way of looking at it. The other way is to see if you just look at the fundamentals, like there's still a lot of firepower out there, right? If you look at J&J, Roche, and we can go down the list, right? On the other side, the top line is flattening, right? While we still have good margins, and the increase from the regulators and the pricing pressure is coming, and patent cliff is coming. So if you take all of this together, it clearly puts some pressure to act on some of our companies, right? Which we're in, and some of our competitors. So I do see a continuation of a pretty exciting year in front of us, right? Just picking up on what I find exciting, where do I see the themes? So basically, what really I find exciting is the pace of innovation in certain areas in the last year, and also how do you change your model to participate, right? Because in a sense, we had the discussion of you need to have breakthrough innovation, but the chances of getting there is very small. Right? The chance of failure to really do the big things is very high. So at Bayer, we said in our normal model how we calculate return on investment, and we cannot put this in the normal R&D organization, so we built a separate organization, LEAPS, which basically gets some isolated funds, and they do investments at very different criteria into very early, what we call moonshots, right? So asymmetric opportunities. Very high chance of failure, but if they work, there's a huge upside. And then you just need to think about what type of portfolio do you need to at least have a decent chance, right? I think and that was also triggered about the discussion, what you said, David, in the beginning about, are we as an industry good or bad at risk management, right? Because we're so proud about kind of the rational approach to deal making, valuation, we all have our models and our portfolios and our matrices, right? But if you think about the bigger risks, we're not really that good. Or that would be my hypothesis, and it would be interesting to hear what you guys think about the macro risk, right? If you think about the regulatory pricing pressure, what are we doing as an industry? Do we have good answers if the compensation is being challenged? Have we put into our risk assessment what happens if China, with aggressive NRDL measures, becomes part of a reference pricing bucket, right? So, and then usually people say, these are a very good question, right? But it tells me we don't really have the good answers yet.
So, as I said, thank you, Friedman, first of all, and thank you, everybody. So many interesting comments and threads to pick up on. Maybe let me start, and John, I may come back to you for a moment, because I think you raised in your comments, of course, that there's so much amazing stuff happening at a quick pace. And Debbie, I'll come back to the pace issue in a moment in the cell and gene space. One of the things that's really fascinating to me, you look back at the last couple of years, there are, of course, a couple of very big gene therapy deals that were done. Those were fairly well characterized, I would argue, and not entirely de-risked, but a lot of the risk had already been run out of those programs. I look at the cell therapy space. There are pivotal stage programs on autologous product, so off the shelf, allogenic product, so off the shelf, which solves some of the major logistical concerns that would otherwise be out there, that are sitting in the hands of small innovative companies today, unpartnered. And I'm curious a little bit, why you believe that's the case, what's still scaring industry from embracing them, and maybe how you shared a little bit, how from a Novo perspective are you working to structure your organization such that you can take those risks a bit more aggressively?
So you're talking about you think there are a lot of late-stage programs?
I think there are a couple of notable late-stage cell therapy programs still out there, which suggests to me, again, back to one of my hypotheses moving forward, that we still don't embrace risk quite as aggressively and robustly as an industry on the whole as you might expect, even in a hot spot like cell therapy.
So I can tell you that we've looked at a lot of cell therapy programs and out there with different companies, and for us, one place where we always get tripped up is manufacturing. And it's like a lot of other things. And people are thinking like, I got to figure out the science first, I got to do this, and then manufacturing kind of comes along, but then it ends up biting you. And I think in cell therapies, stem cell therapies, I think our general belief is the FDA is going to hold people to very high standards of reproducibility and quality. And when we've looked out, I think when we look at someone, that's almost the first place we look, is to see what's their manufacturing like. Is that scalable? Do we believe it could be approved by the FDA? And in the meantime, we're off investing hundreds of millions of dollars in our own manufacturing facility, building cell lines that are reproducible, master cell banks that will last for a long time. And I don't think people are going about it in that same way. Others are. And by the way, look at gene therapy, for example. People were really like, let's get the gene therapy going even in the clinic. And now all of a sudden, people are saying, holy moly, we got to make this stuff on a giant scale. And you now see the Pfizers of the world, these other big companies investing hundreds of millions of dollars in manufacturing facilities. We're trying to do some of that work up front. We know we're doing it for ourselves, but maybe become more of a center for other people to try and partner with who have later, earlier or later programs. But I think that's kind of how we see some of the cell therapy. And that may be, when we've looked at things that are later stage, though, that's probably the major reason that we don't do a deal. And I don't know the specific ones you're talking about, so I don't.
Yeah, I will leave them. My job is not to promote here today.
I understand.
You hit exactly the dynamic, and I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, in some sense, play to your strength. Address the large-scale issues that you're quite capable of doing in a way that's differentiated from the smaller entity, and maybe this becomes a magnet, if you will, to attract the ecosystem. And maybe on that ecosystem note, Debbie, I'll come back down. Clearly, J&J has invested quite a bit of time thinking about the structure of the JJDC organization and innovation arm, and I'm interested to hear a little bit about the insider's view on, was part of the motivation there really fundamentally changing our own behaviors as industry executives in promoting or providing an increased incentive and ecosystem to embrace risk differently?
Yeah, so I'll comment on that. I do want to comment on the cell therapy investment because J&J made an investment in a company and a technology in late 2017 in December. We did a deal with a small company out of China called Legend, and they have a BCMA CAR-T program. And it was a very big decision for us to invest in this space. We had been evaluating the space for quite some time. And CD19 was the target that everybody was working on. I think people have made significant investment. When you look at Gilead's acquisition of Kite, which was $11 billion, and when you look at the acquisition that Celgene did, which was a $9 billion. So there's a huge amount of investment going there. In contrast, we did a licensing deal. We did not do an acquisition in the space at the time, and part of our equation was that it is moving so rapidly, we didn't want to do an all-in and done kind of deal. We really wanted to invest in an area and see how we could grow our capabilities and then make further investments as the technology improved. I do think allogeneic will come. I think it'll come sooner than we all even anticipated 2 years ago. And I think there are a lot of good companies working in the allogeneic space. I do think we will learn a lot from the autologous therapies that are being delivered. And we're really excited about it because we presented data at ASH on the BCMA CAR-T, and we saw a 100% response rate in relapse refractory multiple myeloma. So when you think about the innovation, and we talk about incremental versus true innovation, when you are curing diseases where patients were facing certain death, when you are treating childhood blindness, when you are healing patients with hemophilia, those are major advances, and I think cell therapy and gene therapy will absolutely deliver on those promises. I was reading in preparation for this, I was reading an article that was talking about a prediction that Scott Gottlieb made last year at this time, and he basically predicted that the FDA by 2025 would be approving 20 to 30 gene or cell therapy treatments a year. That's amazing. So, I think and that's why I think the deal activity will continue. So let's just on the structure question. So, J&J really positions itself to interact with the ecosystem in a very, very significant way. And we spent a lot of time and thought thinking about the best ways to do that, because we absolutely realize some of the best science is happening outside of our four walls. We try and do internal discovery and development and early stage opportunities, but most of our oncology portfolio has been built through collaboration and partnership. And so part of what we've done is we have a multitude of arms. We have our traditional BD groups that support each of the therapeutic areas, and I had the oncology one, and I have counterparts in each of our therapeutic areas. We also have our innovation centers that are based across the globe. So we have 4 of them, one in south of San Francisco, we have one in Boston, one in London, and one in Shanghai, where we can very deeply interact with the local ecosystem on very early stage opportunities and early science, and really put in place deep collaborations to advance things that are very high risk, that we may not want to do a full licensing deal or acquisition on, but things that we want to fund and invest to move forward. And those groups are charged with really understanding what's going on in those local hotspots. In addition, we have our J Labs, which is and those are dispersed all over the world, where we have housed units where companies can come in and really have all the tools and equipment to really accelerate. There's no strings or ties to those, but we really have a kind of an inside view about what those companies are working on, and we help them progress their science by giving them insights and some capabilities to help them. And then the last piece which you asked about, which is JJDC, that's our equity arm. And so if a company is looking for an equity investment, whether it's a private investment or public investment, that group helps to facilitate that. And sometimes we do those equity investments as part of bigger deals, and sometimes we do them as small seed investments. And we think that broad landscape of opportunity to invest in innovation really helps position people who are working on science to bring it forward and further develop it, and it gives us an opportunity to have a seat to see it at an early stage.
Maybe a question that really could go to any of the 3 panelists I haven't spoken to yet, because I want to talk a little bit ex-US, be that Germany, be that the UK, or frankly, the full scale of the globe that I know we all spend our time scouring and seeking to find innovation. Tying a little bit to some of the discussion that I know occurred over lunchtime about the shifting political environment, and Philippe, I think you mentioned the pause that we may well see next year as we wait to see what's going to happen here. This year, wow, time flies. Time absolutely flies. It will be nice to have that said and done at some point soon, by the way. But I'm curious, to what extent you've started to feel a shift, if you will, in pace of innovation, your ability to identify and access innovation that's not necessarily Cambridge, Massachusetts, or San Diego. My sense is, I feel a quickening pace, which may in part be tied to a redistribution of the world driven by political events and others. But I'm curious what your sense is from that ex-US view.
Yeah, maybe.
Please, Friedman.
So basically, I think, as you say, I think we see a broadening of where innovation comes from, right? It's not just a few centers anymore, but you see various sources of innovation. And over the last few days, we had very impressive discussion around innovation coming from China, right? And basically, for a long time, we were watching this, but it wasn't really that impressive, right? But now, if you look through what's coming out, we see a really significant change, right? In the quality and focus on innovation, quality of data. So I think this will be, and if you look at the change happening in China, I mean, if you just extrapolate this, I think this is something really to watch out for and to have a very good look at.
Yeah, I would echo that, right? So in terms of, I mean, still U.S. is a major source of innovation, but other countries are catching up, especially China. We announced late last year, $1 billion venture fund, right? To leverage innovation coming out of the Chinese companies all across China, actually. So especially in the thing of data science, AI, and that actually as applicable to the pharma, the barrier to entry is almost non-existent, right? So anybody with a great idea and a tech-savvy entrepreneur can set this up, and a graduate student can do it actually, right? So I think so. The world is getting flat, and we absolutely had to be prepared to take advantage of those opportunities. And for us, actually, China is a major market. We are actually the #1 multinational company in China now. We actually just picked Pfizer in terms of the sales. We have about 20,000 employees in China. So it's a major market, and our Chinese marketing company presidents, one day they dream of actually eclipsing U.S. as #1 sales. So it's an important market. Innovation is coming. So actually, it's an area that we actually have to be absolutely prepared and take advantage of.
Well, I would maybe argue a bit differently, because I think, yes, innovation comes predominantly from the US, because we see it very easily, and the full ecosystem is geared toward bringing that innovation from the universities and the incubators into big money to develop it fast. And we see now the same with China, with a ton of money flowing and fueling the innovation. But the truth is, I really see innovation in old Europe, Germany, France, UK, other regions, South Korea, Australia, and and this innovation is as good as the innovation that you find in the US or in China, probably even better in some cases than the Chinese innovation. However, because the ecosystem is not as efficient in putting a lot of money behind it, you don't feel that this is the relevant innovation, because we're all attracted by, they raised 100 million in Series A, so that must be good. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. And frankly, there's a ton of innovation that comes from old Europe that is underfunded and that is ignored. And actually, as a company that is not a huge company, I'm now looking at US and China and these 100 and 150 million Series A as prohibitive for us to invest. Because how can I do a deal on a preclinical compound when they got 150 million in Series A? I'm going to put an upfront, and they're going to say, well, that's not good enough. I got already 150 million. What do you want to pay? And we can find the same innovation or better in Europe for a fraction of the price. So I think let's not confuse innovation with the capacity to fund the innovation.
I think that's a critical point. Money, for better or worse, drives many, many things. I think there's maybe one comment, Philippe, that you made in the introductory comments that I'd like to come back to, and then I'll also open to the room in a few moments. So just, if you have a question, please feel free to come to the microphones, which are distributed throughout the room. But I'd like to come back a little bit to this idea of how do we define innovation? What's truly innovative? What's incremental? I think, I made mention of the north of 400 billion that was put at play last year. Big chunks of that I would put into an incremental innovation bucket, to be, again, somewhat provocative. The innovation coming from old Europe. First, I'd like to hear your thoughts on defining the difference between those two buckets, and what is our role and our responsibility as part of a social contract theory, if you will, to resolve some of these issues?
Yeah. So, when we think about innovation, of course, I'm also super enthusiastic and extremely excited about gene therapy, saying, okay, this sounds like science fiction that is happening now, and it's only the beginning, so it's fascinating. But on the other side, if you look at, for me, I define innovation as something that we will really result in something added for the patients. And when you look at, I was giving the example of PD-1, PD-L1s. We have now 5 or 6 or 7 that are on the market. more or less all the same. They got there with different indication, and there's a commercial fight happening, but the truth is these compounds are almost the same. So if you bring another one, and again, we counted with my team 41 that are in development just in the US, what is the added value of bringing the 39th PD-L1 or PD-1 on the market in the US? I don't see the added value. This is not innovation. These PD-1, PD-L1 were super exciting, but there should be something better. Now, we have Merck. We decided that we have our PD-L1 that is approved on the market. We started a phase 3 against Keytruda in first-line lung with our bispecific PD-L1 TGF-beta trap. The result that we had seen in the phase 1 got us extremely confident that this would completely, significantly raise the bar from 40% response to north of 60, 70% response. This would be real innovation. There's less people that would die thanks to something like that. So it's not gene therapy, but it's real innovation. And I think that we can shape innovation about that. And innovation can be something that is going to make it easier for patients to take their medicine. Innovation can be digital therapies, can be a lot of things. So, and yes, it is also gene therapy, but when we see the industry spending huge amount of money to develop 40 PD-1, PD-L1, that's a waste of money that could go in real innovation. And that's a breach of the social contract that we have.
I completely agree, and I'm wondering a little bit about how we continue to push our respective organizations or clients to fulfill their obligation in this social contract.
And when we were talking about China, so far, I have to say that I've seen a lot of innovation that is, we take something that was innovated, that was a real innovation from the Western world, and we just push the Chinese version fast, and
certainly,
there's a ton of money.
There is a piece of that volume there as well, despite all of the other much more fundamental innovation we are starting to see. But I wanted to pick up, Kumar, on something you said, and keep me honest here if my memory is wrong. But you talked about the position that AZ now enjoys in China. My recollection is if you go back 10, 15 years ago, there was an edict at some point within the AZ organization about the speed in which Chinese registration was going to be sought, the manner in which the portfolio was going to be managed. There was a very conscious, I think, senior executive decision, which is you're now seeing the results of that fruit, or the fruit of that edict. And I'm curious, if maybe you talked a little bit. Was it LEAPS? Was this the name of the program? I'm wondering if to a certain extent we need something similar, right? We're all accustomed to looking at an ENPV in some form or fashion. As soon as I put a probability of technical success on early stage innovation, surprise, surprise, it doesn't look terribly good. I'm wondering if as a business development professional panel, maybe we need to start thinking about things in a different way, which is edict from the top. We're not looking at it that way. I'm looking at science, I'm looking at unmet need, I'm looking at opportunity. I'm not suggesting blindly that anyone's going to ignore economics, but the old tools maybe are broken. And this is a question I actually hadn't had a chance in some of our previous discussions to ask, but I'm curious to get people's thoughts and reactions.
I'll head out. I think anything pre-phase 1, I think it's waste of time to do an NPV analysis. Coming from a card-carrying finance, so I don't think it makes any sense. It's, you need to look at the biology, the science, how excited you are about the science, and then you're pricing the risk, right? So do I have the P&L flexibility to go and actually get the innovation? That's all we should, and we do that for the check the box kind of thing. I don't think we take that seriously, but you need to, especially very early stage. Everybody knows it's meaningless. So, but I think it's a different question if you're talking about a phase 3 asset.
Certainly.
Right? So early science, I think it's total waste of time. That's my opinion. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I think people do NPVs, but I think in the NPVs, I think everybody realizes the limitations of them on early opportunities. And in our organization, I can say that those early opportunities are fueled by what's our strategy, what are our targets of interest, and when we meet with people, what kind of compelling science and work are they doing that gets us excited. And the calculation that we tend to do is, what's the investment to the next decision point, and is that a rational amount to invest to get to that answer? And that doesn't scare us at all. We're happy to make those kinds of investments, but we want to know, what is that investment and what are we going to know at that point? And then, and obviously you can structure deals very creatively to manage that risk. And I think investing early is really important, particularly around the speed. Because a couple of years ago, and I remember well, not to harp on it, but the PD-1 race was crazy. You had companies, after the first 3 PD-1s came out, which a little bit of competition is good because I think it forces people to develop the right things and move quickly, and that's appropriate. But as more came, and you saw deals for $650 and $750 just up front, not even the development cost of the future milestones, that is money that could go into true innovation and things that are truly different. And I think we do need to police ourselves a little bit around those things and make sure we do that. So I do think a lot of us think about how do we invest, not by ENPV on early stage opportunities, but by what's the science.
I think if you look at how we, the amount that we invest in the pre-phase 1 stuff, I mean, where there's no NPV that can be, giving us any indication. I'm not even sure that, the way we're investing in these early stages is making always economical sense. And yet it's part of what we are. We need to foster innovation, and we put a lot of, early money into pockets, and, sometimes we need to adjust the strategy because we go one way and we realize that, it didn't work. But, it's very difficult to put an economic value on these early investments. And, some companies had done something like that. I mean, Celgene was not having, for a long time earlier research and was just saying, I'm going to buy it. And it's also a model.
Absolutely. John?
I'll say 30 seconds about things if we're going to turn it over to people, about innovation. NPVs are like a warm blanket. That's all they are. It gives someone in finance a little comfort that they're not too far out of their ski tips. I'm not even sure in phase 3 it's that great, particularly if it's an innovative medicine. How do you know what the market is? When I was much younger, I was like the youngest person on the team that brought Rituxan into Genentech. The base case scenario for sales, I think if it did well, was I think $350 million peak. An upside was $450 million. So all I say is, I know one thing about NPV. Whenever I see one, I know it's exactly wrong. I don't know if it's wrong high or wrong low. I just know it's wrong. That's one thing about innovation. The second about innovation is I think it's the lens at which you look at innovation. So we look at it as, was it done by rational drug design? Was it a phenotypic screen? All these crazy, how's artificial intelligence? If you look at it from a patient lens, innovation is very simple. It's 2 or 3 things. It's a drug that makes their life substantially better, preferably cures whatever disease they have. Second, it's available at a reasonable price. And that's, and better yet, it's in a form, in a way that they get it that's convenient for their life. That's how they see innovation. And we forget about it. We're like this small little group here, and I mean people in drug development. There's billions of people out there who don't know what we're doing. They just want drugs that make their life better.
I think that's really well said, and a terrific place to take a pause. And again, encourage, if there are folks in the room, please, we'd be happy to answer questions.
Yeah, please introduce yourself, and as I mentioned earlier, ask a question. If you please don't tell a story. So, please introduce.
My name is In Hong Gao with Viva Biotech. I would like to hear your take on new modalities such as PROTEC or undruggable targets that people are getting excited about, and I haven't heard comments from here. So what will it take to get the farmers get excited on that?
So PROTAC, so we are definitely interested in PROTACs. We have an ongoing internal effort. We haven't done any deal. Right? I think it's a very interesting concept. especially with a couple of internal oncology programs that are coming online. I'm sure other companies have done deals, right? C4 and other companies have done deal with other large companies. Absolutely, it's a new small molecule modality, right? One way to think about PROTACs. But so absolutely, we are AZ is very interested, and I'm sure my peers would agree with that as well.
Hi, my name is Ella Lee, and I'm the partner of CGC Innovation Fund. So I come from a healthcare science background, so I have a really strong focus in the healthcare deal. So I wonder whether you can share some insight about the investment in early stage biotech company from a corporate perspective, when there's a lot of great technology or innovation going on, but it just doesn't have so much data and a lack of course, a lot of data moving forward. So I wonder whether you can share some of your comments about that. Thank you.
I don't feel like I'm super qualified to talk about early innovation, not being a scientist. But I think we try to look at innovation, in the pockets where we believe that we can make a difference, and where we can, as a Merck KGaA, German company that is family-owned, that is not a super big entity, can reasonably invest. So, for example, gene therapy. We have looked at gene therapy. We had investments in gene therapy, and then we decided to spin off these investments into a company called Precision, because we felt that we were not capable of investing enough to make it justice. We're super excited about gene therapy. We believe that actually we are more comfortable than you are on manufacturing, partly because part of our group is Millipore Sigma, and we are one of the leaders in this kind of manufacturing. But you just need to have the right investments, and the right investment in gene therapy are massive.
Maybe just adding one brief comment, since the question was really about advice at that early stage where data is still nascent. The world is becoming such a small place. I was sitting recently with a small company in Asia with a very innovative platform. They had an investment plan in place, well capitalized, would have spent, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million over the next year or two. We were able to convene a really fascinating international advisory board, folks such as yourselves and your scientific and clinical development and regulatory colleagues. A completely revamped investment and development plan came out of that process that I think will deliver the data in the right fashion, that will support the partnering discussions. And the earlier that those conversations are ongoing, that scientific interaction is actually occurring. And I see that more and more in a really exciting way on a global basis. And I just would say briefly that I encourage those conversations to be had very, very early on. And I think most people's organizations are increasingly open to that type of interaction. Is there another question here?
Yes, thank you. Peter Shapiro from Global Data. So you talked a little bit earlier about the manufacturing requirements of cell and gene therapies. Are there other advanced therapeutic technologies you see on the horizon where manufacturing will become a sort of a greater burden?
Gene editing is one example,
Yeah.
right? CRISPR and gene editing, right? So I mean, that's the point that I want to address what you made. So you asked about the cell therapy, right? If you look at the typical pharma 10 years ago, the product mix is relatively straightforward. They may have a mostly small molecule, an antibody, maybe some vaccine programs. If you look at what we show a slide in AZ, there's about 15 different modalities, if you include, right, antibody drug conjugates, oligonucleotides, modified RNAs. Now we even have inorganic salt, sodium, zirconium, cyclosilicate. They got approved recently. So it's the typical large pharma's product mix is very complex. That brings its own manufacturing complexities. So the gene editing would be the next, not just CRISPR, going beyond the other gene editing technologies that are coming online. That could add another layer of complexity.
will, but I would say autologous cell therapy manufacturing
That's it.
is at the pinnacle that I can see right now of difficulty. And we're hoping that we're coming back down and finding easier ways to manufacture even those things. And so I hope nothing's as challenging as that, but I'm sure there will be.
Stephen Tepper from IBI. I just want to maybe to relate to innovation. Most of your innovation you're talking about mainly in oncology and rare diseases. Innovation in CNS, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, ALS. It seems like over there we still have like a black hole. So do you have any ideas of where an innovation could come in those fields?
Well, you could see the first product approved for Alzheimer's in 2020 if aducanumab is approved after Biogen has successfully pushed or punched the FDA in the nose a few times. I'll tell you one other perspective is, think about us. We work in diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular. Those they kill millions of people over time. And the amount of money that's spent today on trying to cure those diseases versus the quick hits in oncology and rare diseases, there's virtually no venture capital money going into those. So I do think you might see something soon in Alzheimer's. Trust me, personally, I pray for that. Every time I look for my keys, I'm not sure what's happening. But I wish there actually were a better investment in different types of innovation that affect millions of people. And VCs, they're not even close to incentivized to invest in that system.
John, I think it's a very important point, right? Because if you look at innovation from a high level, right? When the reimbursement pressure came, the industry went into smaller and smaller indication where it was easier to create a difference, but for fewer and fewer people, right? And if, as you said, if you look at cardiovascular, right, or Alzheimer, I mean, respiratory, I mean, there are big things out there, right? Millions of people, and as an industry, we've been looking for the easier things, right? Again, for these people who are affected, also massive differences. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the overall picture, I think there are some problems to tackle there. Yeah.
I agree.
Terrific. I think we're probably just about approaching the hour. I want to say thank you very much to the panel. It's always a pleasure to have the chance to reconnect and to sit and have a fascinating conversation. Look forward to continuing it, hopefully in many different settings over the coming year. Thank you.
Yeah. I tend to have that effect on our panelists. I walk up on stage and there's silence. But I do want to thank each and every one of you. I know being out here during this Biotech Showcase JPM week, that's how we refer to it, is extraordinarily busy, and I really do thank each and every one of you for taking your time out of your schedules to come and join us. Thank you for a great discussion, and thank you for leading this discussion.
Thank you.
With that said, we are adjourned, and it's, night number 2 or 3 for parties. So be healthy and safe out there, everybody.